Hello, welcome back. Today we have a massive feeding as well as we're going to try to harvest a bunch out so we can keep our garden nice and fed throughout the summer as it's starting, we're getting a lot of production. So I'm going to pull off the cover here and wow, look at that. You can see a couple of worms on the surface because they like to come up all the way to the cover, and you can just see there's just a thick carpet of just pure castings all over the entire thing, which is part of the reason why we leave that cover on, is so that they can come up to the surface and leave their castings. And I don't think I've ever seen such a thick carpet of castings left on here. So I'm just gonna start by just harvesting these castings directly. I'm gonna make a little spot in the corner where I'm gonna pull all the castings away, and if I see any large worms, I'm gonna throw them over there. And I'm just gonna skim all these perfect fluffy worm castings right off the top and harvest them for my garden. So I can just sort of scrape off the top until I start seeing cardboard, because the cardboard is obviously not broken down. That's what I fed them, what I add to them every week. So if I see a lot of cardboard, I know they haven't fully processed that section yet. But look at that. Oh, it's so light and fluffy. It's just gorgeous. And if I do get a worm here and there, it's fine. I've got quite a few worms to spare. Now look at that. Just from skimming off the top, I've already got this kind of overflowing. Look at that. They look perfect. My garden's gonna love that. Okay, so just a quick reorienting everyone for if anyone's new. I have like this mini flow through bin, and basically all that means is I feed on one side and I harvest on other side, and every week when I check on each of my two bins every other week, so every week I do one of them. And what I do is I come and I fluff everything up and I move everything over a little bit so that at the end of the day, the most broken down stuff ends up at the right. And I add new food all the way over on the left. This means the worms mostly stay over on this side, which makes it easier to harvest some finished casting. Another container for me? So that's kind of the whole plan. I don't normally skim stuff off the top like I did today. There was just so much available I couldn't resist. But you can see over to the right, there's also more just broken down stuff that I've moved over the time. I'm gonna go ahead and I got a bigger box here. I'm gonna grab some more of this just because this bin's getting a little bit full. So I want to add a little bit more. So there's a couple of worms here and there all the way over on the right where the finished castings are, just because there's not that much food over there. There's maybe a little bit of food, but it's still like moist and they'll still go over there and hang out. But you'll see in a minute when we go over to the other side of the bin where there is still food, it is teeming with worms. So that's kind of the difference here. It makes this side much easier to harvest just because there's only a couple of worms here and there, and I can pull it out without depopulating my worm bin. Makes it nice and easy. So that's all I'm gonna pull out today. But that's still quite a bit, and it makes it very easy to do. And then what I'm gonna do now is fluff it up. So fluffing it up does two things. First of all, it allows me to move everything over. And then it also kind of allows me to check to see if there's anything wrong, to make sure the moisture level's right. So even as I just go down further on the finish, there's more worms, and that's mostly because even though there's not food here, it is like a good moisture level that they like. So you'll see when I finish, I'll stack the finished castings up as high as I can to start to like dry it out a little bit, because they don't like it as much when they're dry. So, and also the other thing is this, you know, one of the things I check as I go through and I fluff it up is like, is the moisture level in this bin correct? So the moisture level isn't like over the top too bad, but it could definitely be less moist and be perfectly fine, which allows me to, because I don't have any holes in the bottom, I just maintain the correct moisture. It's a much healthier way to keep your worm ecosystem going. You also don't lose worms through the bottom. So it just kind of tells me how much cardboard I need to have, because the cardboard does a great job at absorbing the moisture. And then one other little fringe benefit is that it adds oxygen to the system to encourage the type of bacteria that we want, and not that stinky bacteria that thrives in low oxygen environments. And then, I mean, not really a benefit, but I just like doing it. I like opening it up and seeing all my, you know, red healthy worms, all different levels. I like it when I can see like the new cocoons going. It means, you know, they have enough space and food to want to reproduce. So over this winter, I had split this bin from 1 into 2, and so there was a lot of extra space and a lot of extra food, and so I was seeing a lot of cocoons. Now I just see a lot of worms with an occasional cocoon. Just means, you know, they can get through the food that I'm giving them, is mostly what that means. So this population I have right now is, you know, about appropriate for the amount of kitchen scraps we go through. There's a few seeds. I'm just going to throw those over to the right so they have a little bit longer to break down. And look at that. There's just worms. I didn't used to see worms so far over to the right. I think it's just because my population it keeps going up, which also kind of tells me I'm doing something right. Yeah, they like it. They like it enough that they're surviving and they're thriving. So I'm gonna stack up the finished castings like this a little bit. That way, like they're so wet, they're like clay staying together. So I'm gonna stack them up like that. Oh, look at that! Wow! It's just a pure clump of worms. Okay, now you can't tell this over video, but I can smell it, and this smells just a little bit stinky. That's another sign that there's too much moisture in here, which means it's not allowing enough oxygen to get down. The water sort of smothers it a little bit, and so that's another sign I need to add quite a bit of cardboard when I feed today. Because I mean, when I'm gonna add watermelon rind in a bit, and there's a lot. It's called watermelon for a reason, because there's a lot of water in it. So I'm gonna have to. I would normally add a lot of cardboard just to counteract the water from the watermelon. I'm gonna have to add even more because there's already too much water in the system. So I'm gonna be doing both things. I might even consider, I don't love the idea, but leaving the top off of the system which will allow more water or moisture to escape. It's not something I've ever had to do before, but it is an option if, I am getting just too much water in here. Okay, so this last section is where we fed last. Oh, look, there's a cherry that didn't get broken down. So we can see how much of the food they went through in the last 2 weeks, as well as kind of just where the majority of they are. It looks like some of the cherries that didn't have a broken skin, they didn't manage to get into. They weren't able to go through the skin. But so it's kind of funny to see completely intact cherries and then not a whole lot else. Oh, I think this is like the skin of some squash, but they've completely eaten out the flesh and just left the skin behind. So you can see that at a couple of places. And yeah, here's another cherry where they just didn't manage to get through the skin. If I break it open like that, they'll eat it up no problem. Interesting, interesting sort of scenario. Yeah, and it's just this is where the food is, so this is where the worms are. They're here to eat. It is way too wet though. It is way too wet. I'm gonna maybe add all the shredded cardboard I have right now. Oh, look at that. They're just enjoying life. Look at that. Living their best worm life. Yeah, I see some intact. I see some of the cherries. They didn't get through the skin, but I don't really see anything else. So I think they were just having a hard time with the cherry skin. Give it a little bit time to break down, and they'll get through it no problem. The main thing is it's kind of like sopping wet, which is too wet. It should be moist and not actually wet. Think of like a sponge that you got, you wetted it and then you fully wrunged out and it's not dripping anymore. It's just sort of moist. That's what you're going for. This is definitely like a sponge with almost as much water as it can hold, which is not what we're going for here. So let's fix that. So the way we fix, so kind of the way we're gonna fix, wringing out the sponge is by adding another sponge. So I'm gonna add a good deal of cardboard. So I'll start with this much, and because the existing system was too wet, I'm just gonna start by mixing it in with what we already had. This will allow it to, I don't normally do this. I'm only doing this as kind of a corrective measure, because of, kind of the issues we had. And then, so that's sort of like an extra corrective measure, right? That's on top of what I would normally do. So now normally, right, I wouldn't have added all this, but it needed it. So normally I would start by adding, a bed of cardboard. This is where the worms like to hang out, and it's an emergency food source that they can use. It's not their preferred, but it will, keep them alive. To that, I add in a good nitrogen source, my coffee grounds for the week, as well as some crushed up eggshells. Don't do what I'm doing here. These eggshells aren't quite crushed up enough. I'm okay if they, they'll break down eventually and make their way into the garden. Ideally, these would be ground a little bit more fine. Someone suggested I get an old coffee grinder and put the eggshells through that. So we're still looking through thrift stores to see if we can find an old used one. Because ideally these would be, the eggshells would be fine enough so that the worms can use them in their gizzard. All right, then I'm gonna add my, my kitchen clippings from the week, the vegetable scraps. I keep these just in the freezer in a reusable Ziploc bag, so they don't attract any pests and they don't rot too much. So we got some banana peels, some celery stalks, and a cucumber that I didn't manage to get quickly enough out of the garden, so it kind of had gone bitter. I'm going to add a little bit more bedding on top of that, just because I don't want too much food all stacked on top of each other, because it makes it hard for the worms to get to it. And then we also had some watermelon rind, and they love this. They just go through it right away. There's a few mushrooms in here too. But these have a lot of water in them, so once again, the problem with the system is that it already has too much water, so I need to add as much. That's maybe not the ideal thing to feed them this week, so I'm going to add some more on top of that. And then I always take some of the previous week's broken down bits, and I use that to kind of tuck it in. So here we have it. We have all the new stuff that they're working on. Hopefully it won't be quite so wet this time. And then I'm probably going to come back throughout the week and keep taking a little bit off the top, because the top will dry out and the worms will leave, and it'll make it a little bit easier to pull that right off. And then I'll be able to pile up a little bit more, and that'll dry out, and I'll pull it out. So next time when we check on this, there should be this side here should be worn down a little bit more. And that way we can lower the whole level of this whole system a little bit. It's getting a little deep. It's a little bit more than 6 inches deep. All right, that was a long one, but we had to take some corrective action. So we'll check in 2 weeks to see how well the extra cardboard did at absorbing the moisture, and we'll see how well the worms did in eating through all the food we gave them today. All right, see you next time.